great day. Take care.
All right, so let's get started with the question. So, what were interactions like between the native tribes and the colonists? What were some things that we saw so far that can kind of give us the answer here? Yeah, Angela. No, yeah. So we've seen times where they would push the native groups or native tribes off the land, right? Because especially when we look at English, right, migration, all those English colonies, they had the idea of really pushing them out of the way so that their people can kind of inherit the land and kind of grow whatever crops, whether it was tobacco, whether it was indigo, all these different types of crops. So we saw circumstances like that. What were some other things we saw? Yeah, Veronica. Yeah, we've also seen circumstances with like the French, right? The French had created trade relations, right, with the different groups. You've even had intermarriage in order to create kind of a stable relationship between the different groups. And then we also seen the last one. What's another example we saw? Using the different nation, the other kingdom. We talked about England, talked about France. What was the other one that we saw? Yeah, Rainer. Yeah, you're talking about the, I think you said the labor, right? Yeah. Yeah, they force them into labor. So we've had all different types, right? Depending on really the where you're looking at, which kingdom you're talking about, they have different interactions with each one of them. Now, this period, we really are focusing on the English interaction because we already mentioned the French and the Spanish. And we're going to talk about, especially today, we'll talk about the kind of the pushback we saw between both the colonists and the native groups, right? Because we've seen already to this point some examples of them pushing them out of land, but now we'll see some pushback from the native tribes against the English colonists as well, okay? Any questions on that? So what are some things that we talked about last time to kind of give us a little bit of a summary, so at least we're all up to speed here? What did we talk about last week? It's another long weekend. Okay. Yeah, we did the lesson on indentured servitude and slavery. I know you guys made that comparison between the two. That was what the homework assignment was. It was a pretty lengthy one, but it was, a really good in-depth look at the differences between the two. And specifically, when we look at places like Maryland, we look at Virginia, they wanted to expand their land, right? They wanted to gain more territory to farm, and they needed more people to work to farm the land because they didn't have enough at the time. You're going to notice that throughout this period that the whole idea for Virginia specifically and Maryland and some of the other colonies around that area are trying to expand their land territory as much as possible, okay? And they want people to work the land. So one of the things they do to give people an incentive was they created the headright system, right? The headright system basically grants anybody 50 acres of land to anyone that wants to pay for laborers to come work there, right? It's giving incentives for more people to show up. Now, we already talked about indentured servitude. Basically, it's someone paying off a debt that they already have. Now, it's only for a limited amount of time. And then we're going to talk about today kind of the end of indentured servitude. Right? There's going to be a specific incident that kind of makes the English monarchs and even the joint stock companies say, yeah, maybe indentured servitude is not the right way to go. All right? But there was an introduction of slavery, but not to a mass yet, right? After the incident we talk about today, they start really saying, all right, screw indentured servitude, let's go full 100% into slavery, okay? All right. So let's get started. So, I might have mentioned this already, but by the 1660s, I already talked about how tobacco prices have already kind of decreased, right? Because they started to overproduce a certain amount of tobacco, and kind of the demand was not matching what they were producing. So there was overproduction of tobacco, and they weren't making as much money. So one of the things that what really tried to happen was that these colonies are trying to regulate the prices that were going to England, And England kind of didn't like that idea that they were trying to kind of take the trade prices into their own hands. So they kind of slapped down their hand and stopped them from doing that, which kind of caused some resentment to happen between the colonists and the crown, and it only just starts to grow. All right, this is just another instance of kind of a tension building between these two sides. All right, now what we'll talk about as well is that between not only just the colonists and the crown that there was tensions, but even between the governments within those colonies and specific people in the colonies themselves, there was tension too. Okay, one of the examples of this is Roger Williams. Roger Williams was in Salem, Massachusetts. Now, what's interesting about Roger Williams is that he wanted to have, first off, a full break from the Anglican Church. So remember, the Puritans didn't want to have a full break. They wanted to have a purifying of it, right? He wanted to have a complete break, and he even started to kind of preach more radicalized ideas of Puritanism, right? More of the idea that they should separate completely and having more religious freedom to more groups. This was seen as dangerous because his eyes is that you can't force somebody to be a Christian. They have to find that on their own. So for a lot of people, he was seen as a radical, as a heretic, right? They thought he was nuts, that his ideas would bring an end to their little colony. So they wanted to really exile him. So he goes to Rhode Island, right? He finds Rhode Island. So what's interesting here is you take a look at all the different colonies, right? You see the Massachusetts Bay Colony and also Plymouth. People from these different colonies kind of spread and go to different areas. So Roger Williams goes down here into Rhode Island and finds Rhode Island, or in Providence. Now, what his colony does, this is pretty interesting for the time, is that at first, he ends up allowing everyone can vote. Now, it changes because you want to try to give incentives for people to show up. So at first, you're like, wow, this is great. Everyone can vote, even if you're a poor person without land. That changes, though, right? He gets everyone to show up, and he ends up changing the rule. But what was even more interesting was that his treatment of the natives of the area was actually pretty good. He was trying to convert them to Christianity, but he didn't force it upon them. He believed that you can, basically any religion, right, is fine. And the fact that you might have a different version of Christianity, that's okay. I'm not going to force you to be something different that you can't be. And this is important because you start to see this idea happen in other places as well, right? We'll talk about in Pennsylvania, right? That becomes the same type of concept, okay? And I think partially it has to do with the fact that he wants to have more and more people flock to his colony. And if you're really a strict person on religion, then you're just going to be the same exact thing as the Puritans were. So I think he wanted to kind of change his mindset when it came to that, right? So another person that showed some problems when it came to the power of the leadership of a colony was Anne Hutchinson. Now, Anne Hutchinson was actually, like, for the time period, very historic, very smart, very strong-willed. She basically had studied the Bible like to a T, to the point where she started to kind of preach her own sermons in these small meetings that ended up having around like 80 people, like twice a week. She originally was part of a group of kind of like these like religious healers is what I forgot like the actual name of the group, but these people that were religious healers that would kind of help give first aid to those in the area, but also that were very big on the on teaching really the Bible to groups. Now, at the time, a woman was not supposed to give sermons, right? It was only a man's job to do, but she was giving sermons in secret, to the point where people like John Winthrop and Cotton were basic leaders of that colony, and they kind of saw her as being kind of a threat to their power. So what they would do is they actually would send spies into her meetings to see if everything is with the like up and up, right? To the point where they had made up a bogus claim about her, saying that she was a heretic, right? Or someone that's against the religion, right? They put her on trial, and all of a sudden they started berating her with questions about the Bible, trying to get her to slip. And she literally was like perfect. She had them beat in every way, shape, or form. She literally made them look dumb when it came to the Bible and everything. Her only problem, her only flaw, was that by the end of the trial, she almost won the trial. But then she said, I heard messages from God himself. And then once she said that, you're a witch, you're a heretic, and everyone thought she was against them. And they exiled her. Okay? Now, it didn't end from there. They kind of really treated her pretty horribly, right? She was pregnant at the time. She ended up giving stillbirth. Basically, the child was deformed, right, when she had the baby, and they started claiming she gave birth to a demon. And they started bashing her, right? What happened was she ended up going to Rhode Island, and when she heard that Massachusetts Bay might go over and take over Rhode Island, she had fled to New York. She goes to kind of Westchester County, but more into Long Island, and she ends up, her and her family get attacked by Native Americans, and she gets killed. She dies there, right? But what her story really shows kind of a lot of the tensions that start to happen between just colonists that might have different feelings toward religion and those people, leaders of those colonies themselves, right? Another example of people kind of going to different directions is in Connecticut. Thomas Hooker goes goes really into Hartford, right? Goes into Connecticut from the Massachusetts Bay, and basically creates his own colony over here. All right, so goes to Massachusetts Bay, goes into Hartford. Some other groups go into New Haven. They actually end up combining together and forming this important fundamental orders of Connecticut. All right, and this is kind of a law system that actually a lot of people, even from here on out, copy Connecticut's law system and how they run their colonies as well. Okay. The last one of the really New England colonies is New Hampshire. This is a very small-ish colony compared to all the ones we've seen before. This is not too complicated. It's really just they originally have some settlers from Massachusetts Bay go to New Hampshire, created their own colony just because they want to kind of separate from the religious kind of strictness of the area. And obviously the monarch ends up taking control of it, making it a royal colony, right? Now, the really big chunk of what today's lesson is going to be about is really the instability and kind of conflict that comes along with the colonists being there and expanding their land territory. And we're going to see this same trend, this same theme happen in many different instances throughout American history, okay? So what we see, there's a few things that we can kind of point to. First off, they want to basically gain more resources, right? The expansion of land to farm for tobacco, indigo, to make money, right? That's going to be the big reason why they do some of these things. We also start to see reasons for them to try to legitimize their colonial power and gain more territory to try to strengthen the colony itself. And then we even start to see instances where they are trying to define really the cultural traditions of the area and try to instill upon that onto the natives too. All right, so these are all things that kind of lead to interactions between the natives, and I'll explain to you different examples that go along with that. Right, each of them has their own kind of backstory. There's really only two that are the most important you need to know. Right. So the very first one, which gives you a slight example, we're not going to go too much in depth into this because it's not in the grand scheme as impactful, right? But it does show you an example. So this example really is how the Puritans were trying to basically expand their territory, and they ended up interacting with the Pequot tribe, right? Now, they basically had annihilated the tribe, right? Pretty horrifically, and this kind of shows that there is more tensions going on in Massachusetts Bay. Now, the next example is probably the most important one, which we're actually going to start the worksheet with today. Okay. Now, the Puritans have some mindset when it comes to this, is that everything they do is okay because it's God gave them permission to do it, right? When we looked at John Winthrop, right, and he makes the claim when they're on that boat, right, in the model of Christian charity, right, he says that God gave us this mission and that we have every right to do what we want because it's God's mission for us. That same mindset happens throughout. their colony, especially in the beginning. So this war was one example, but really we're going to look at King Philip's War. So let's take out the worksheet and we'll jump through King Philip's War first. So we'll kind of understand some of the causes of that war from the worksheet, right? All right, so this is what it looks like. Make sure that you're at the right spot. So what I want you guys to do is get with a partner. I think we should have one group of 3, which is not a big deal. So get with somebody to work with, all right? So you can move around if you want now. Okay, so I'll explain how this works. So the very first part is King Philip's War. So it gives you a little bit of background on the war itself. Okay, and we're gonna talk about it in the lecture as well, but I think it's better for you guys to see documents firsthand to get a feeling of what causes of this war are. So it gives you a little bit of background here, and it gives you 2 documents. All right, document A and document B. All right, what you're gonna do is with your partner, you're gonna split up. One person has document A, one person has document B. On your sheet, you're gonna write in which document you have. All right, you're gonna answer the kind of the context questions here. So at least you're going to be sharing this with your partner when you complete it. All right. The next part, and I'll talk about more when we get there, is it says basically compare your document with your partner, and according to what's up? Oh, okay. Yeah, the King Philip's one. And so the second part, you're going to compare the documents, and you're going to decide which one. Well, first of all, what did the document say? Well, who caused the war? And then secondly, which one is more trustworthy, right? And why, okay? And lastly, you're going to be talking about the similarities and differences, and then which one seems more trustworthy, which we kind of already talked about based on your comparison, okay? So let's first we're going to be doing this part first. So get with partner or your group, whichever you want, and you're going to be doing the first section. So that's King Philip's section. You guys talk to each other on the next parts with your groups, okay? So let's first, I'll connect my screen. We'll talk about document A, right? Let's talk about document A first. Document A is by John Easton, okay? John Easton's account of what had happened at the time. So first off, to answer some of the questions, so first off, who wrote the document name and who they were, right? So obviously, if you're doing document A, John Easton, right? He's a Rhode Island official, right? And he met with Metacom, okay? He met with Metacom to just kind of discuss what was going on, right? So that's who he is. Was it written before or after the war, right? First, when was it written? Before or after? It was before the war, because they had. What happened was it ended with them saying, "We discussed what was going on," and then all of a sudden they had the war afterward. It was kind of like they said we're going to end up battling it out with Metacom afterward. Okay. Was it written for a specific purpose? Is it trying to convince readers of something? What was it trying to do? What was the purpose of A? What was the purpose of A? Yeah. Yeah, it was showing kind of some of the issues and grievances, right, of Metacom, right? Kind of, if you look at it, he named specific grievances that he has with them, and one of the grievances, especially, was the fact that the trust between his group and those Europeans have disintegrated, right? He talks about his father being pretty great guy, kind of stopped the native tribes from attacking the colonists, and even taught them how to farm and hunt, and even gave them more land than they ever expected to get. And then all of a sudden, nowadays they are treating them poorly, right? They're trying to take more land. They're blaming him and his group for a bunch of list of reasons, right? So it tries to show really the tension here. So according to this document, what caused the war? You look at A. What caused the war? Yeah. Yeah, they're saying, so if you're going to pick which side, they're saying what the English kind of, who instigated, who kind of caused this war more between the two groups? The English did, right? So they're saying that the English was kind of pushing the buttons as much as humanly possible. And Metacom was kind of, or King Philip, according to the colonists, was trying to be a nice guy about it, saying, listen, like, I'm not trying to, start a war between the colonists. We've been living in this area forever. And even my father's had pretty good relations with the colonists. We're not going to, cause havoc now. But he's trying to say there's some problems here that we need to kind of fix, or else it's going to get pretty bad, right? So on this document, it's trying to say that the English were kind of the instigators, right? How trustworthy is this document? How trustworthy is document A? How would you look at it? Yeah.
Explains what's going on and isn't trying to paint either or in a good or bad light. Just saying what's happening.
It's now, like, when it comes to bias and trustworthiness, it's really up to the reader of the document. I'm not going to tell you perfectly, like, yes, this is completely trustworthy, don't even doubt it. But I'll tell you the difference when you look at some other documents of this one. This is more just looking at what Metacom said, right? Other documents you'll see will give you their spin on what was going on, right? And we've seen this before, especially even when we looked at the debate of Native American treatment from the Spanish point of view, right? We did that document. You see some biases in those documents. This one's kind of just saying, listen, I talked to him. This is what he told me with the grievances. And then when I left, I got a message from the governor of Plymouth saying that they're going to start fighting with them soon. So it was just kind of like an account. So you can kind of say this is a trustworthy one because it's just an account of what had happened between that discussion. Okay? So let's take a look at now document B. All right, so who is Edward Randolph? Who is Edward Randolph? First off, he wrote it. Who is he, though? Yeah. Yeah, so obviously he's sent from England to try to say, hey, what's going on there? And this is our colony, and there's a lot of problems happening, right? So he was sent by the English government to see what was going on. Was this written before or after the war? After, right? Right. Looking at after, this is kind of like a detective was sent to go check out what caused this problem to occur. Okay. Was it written for a specific purpose? What was the purpose of this? What was the purpose of this document? What do you think? What's the purpose of document B? Yeah. Yeah, it was like an investigative, right? It was an investigative piece to see kind of tell England, right, what was going on. So this is kind of a investigative summary of what caused the war. According to this document, what caused the war? What did document B say? For who caused the war? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we talked about how they fought the Chinese guy, and whatever it is now, about what King Philip for the protection of Christianity, and then you have now Pope, and how King Philip kind of like took down.
So, well, King Philip is actually Metacom. They're the same guy. So it's like so they're the same dude, King Philip and Metacom, because that's how the English called him. They're the same person. That's why it's called King Philip's War, because it's Metacom is the leader of the natives. So they're the same person. So they're trying to say that Metacom held Mount Hope, right, and that the colonists really wanted Mount Hope. So it was kind of like a mix of the two things where they're saying that the colonists had taught King Philip and the natives how to use weaponry, and now they had held certain locations, and all of a sudden you started to see that the colonists were starting to blame them for like little things, like, oh, they're trampling on some of our land, and then they started to say even the colonists were allowing the cows and the different herds go into natives' land to try to make them leave, and then they tried to convert the natives to Christianity, and it was just showing a little bit of like different clashes in certain manners. Okay. And then, how trustworthy is this account or this document? What would you say here? How would you say this? Is this trustworthy? Is this not trustworthy? Yeah.
Well, it is reliable. He didn't have enough here.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's when you look at trustworthiness, you also have to look at, do they have a motive to say one thing over the other, right? So you could say this is a trustworthy document because it's similar to the document A. Document A was more of it was almost like an interview, right, with Metacom or King Philip. Document B was more like an investigative piece from the English crown or government's point of view to say what was going on in our colony and that we don't know about, right? Good. So what I want you guys to do is, since we all kind of understand, right, the context of both documents now, I'll let you guys compare with one another, right? What caused the war? I want you guys to kind of give me some list of things that would go into these little sections here, right? You can do bullet points if you want. What caused the war, according to your perspectives, what you guys read, right? Yeah, so now you're going to talk with the other person's document and get their point of view, right? So I think I already kind of answered that question, so you should just fill that in already. And then as we finish, I want you guys to do the similarities and differences between your different accounts.